She waited for her husband in his favorite nightdress. After 3 years, he returned with a new wife and children and threatened, "Accept them or I'll divorce you." She refused, left the house, and within 3 days, everything changed. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. Heavenly God, we come before you with humble hearts. Please wrap every woman in this family with strength that never breaks, peace that calms every storm, and love that heals even silent pain. Bless their health, protect their dignity, and reward every sacrifice they make for their families. Let no woman feel alone, forgotten, or weak. Fill our homes with harmony, our hearts with patience, and our lives with mercy and light. Keep this family united in faith, respect, and genuine love. Amen. My beautiful family, Christmas has passed, but its spirit should remain alive in our hearts. Tell me in the comments, how was your Christmas and what did you do with your loved ones? I truly want to know. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." The emerald silk nightdress clung to Georgia Presswidge's skin like a whispered promise, the fabric her husband had loved 3 years ago when he'd last seen her wear it. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Manhattan penthouse, watching snowflakes drift past the glass, her reflection staring back with dark eyes that still held hope, despite everything her mind whispered in warning. 3 years since Joel Paris had kissed her goodbye at JFK, promising 6 months of European expansion for Paris manufacturing. 6 months had stretched into something unrecognizable through a parade of excuses that seemed reasonable at the time, but now sat heavy in her stomach like stones. The champagne was perfectly chilled. Dom Perignon, the year they'd married. The glasses caught city lights and threw fractured rainbows across the mahogany table. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to say what her voice couldn't manage anymore after months of one-sided phone calls and late texts with hollow apologies. "I love you, Georgia. Just a few more weeks. My leg still hasn't healed from the accident. Doctors won't clear me for the flight. The permits are taking longer than expected. I can't leave London." Excuses. But she'd believed everyone because Joel Paris wasn't a liar. He was her husband, her partner, the man she'd built an empire for, even if he didn't know the full extent of what she'd done to keep his father's failing company alive. The private elevator chimed. Her heart kicked against her ribs. She turned from the window, smile forming, hands smoothing the emerald silk. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of empty sheets and cold mornings and business deals she'd negotiated alone while he took credit from across an ocean. But he was home now. Everything would make sense. The elevator doors slid open. Joel Paris stepped into the penthouse and Georgia's breath caught. Still handsome at 45, blonde hair shot through with silver, shoulders broad in a charcoal suit she didn't recognize. His blue eyes met hers across the marble expanse, and she waited for warmth, recognition, relief. His gaze was ice. "Georgia," not "my love," not "I've missed you." Just her name, spoken like greeting a forgotten business associate. "Joel." The word came out smaller than intended. She took a step toward him, arms beginning to rise, and that's when she saw movement behind him. A woman emerged from the elevator, young, late 20s, strawberry blonde hair in soft waves, and nervous green eyes darting around the penthouse. She wore a cream dress that cost more than most monthly rents, held a baby against her shoulder, maybe 6 months old, with Joel's blonde hair already growing. A toddler clung to her other hand, a little boy with Joel's blue eyes and that distinctive Paris chin. Georgia's arms fell. The champagne glasses mocked her from across the room. "Who is this?" Steady voice. That was something. Her knees threatened to buckle, the floor tilting like a ship's deck, but her voice remained controlled. The same voice she used in boardrooms when men tried to talk over her. Joel walked past her into the living room as if he owned it. He didn't know Georgia's name was on the deed, hidden in corporate structures his lawyers never examined. He set down a leather briefcase she'd never seen and loosened his tie with casual ease. "This is Amy Edgar," he said, gesturing to the woman by the elevator. "My wife, and our children, Joel Jr. and Madison." The words landed like physical blows. Wife, our children. The champagne rose bitter in her throat. "Your wife," she repeated slowly, testing the words, waiting for Joel to laugh and call this a terrible joke. But he sat on their sofa, where they'd spent Sunday mornings reading the Times, and looked at her with something like pity. "We married 18 months ago in London," Joel continued matter-of-factly. "I wanted to tell you sooner, but with the expansion and Amy getting pregnant again, the timing never seemed right." Amy stepped tentatively into the penthouse, heels clicking on marble. The baby made a small sound. "Joel told me you two had separated," she said softly, genuine confusion in her voice. "He said the marriage was over in everything but paperwork." Georgia's laugh came sharp and bitter. "Separated?" She swept her arm around the penthouse, taking in photos of her and Joel on every surface, the Afghan she'd knitted draped over his chair, his preferred scotch waiting on the bar. "Does this look separated? I've been paying this mortgage, running Paris Manufacturing's overseas accounts, signing off on every major decision while you built your second family." Something cold flickered across Joel's face. "You've been helpful," he acknowledged, and the word helpful stabbed through her chest. "I appreciate your contributions, which is why I'm willing to make this arrangement work for everyone." He leaned back, pulling Amy down beside him with proprietary ease. The gesture was comfortable, the unconscious intimacy of months or years together. Georgia saw it and felt something crack inside. "The penthouse is large enough for all of us," Joel continued. "You'll take the west wing. Amy and the children will have the east wing. We'll be civilized. Many cultures have similar arrangements. You're a sophisticated woman, Georgia. You understand how modern relationships work." "Civilized," Georgia tested the word. "You want me to live with your mistress and illegitimate children?" "Amy isn't my mistress. She's my wife. You're the first wife. There's a difference." The baby fussed. Amy rocked her gently, face pale and strained. "Joel, maybe we should talk in private." "There's nothing to discuss," Joel cut her off, voice edged. "This is how it's going to be. Georgia will accept this or I'll divorce her, and my lawyers have already prepared paperwork ensuring you leave with very little. You signed a prenup 15 years ago when you had nothing and I had everything. You'll walk away with the minimum the law requires." The threat hung between them. Georgia stood still, mind racing through offshore accounts and shell corporations Joel knew nothing about. He thought he held all the cards. He thought she was the helpless wife who'd signed away her future out of love. He had no idea he was threatening a woman who could buy his company 3 times over. "No," Georgia said simply. Joel blinked. "Excuse me. No, I won't accept this." She walked to their bedroom and returned in a black dress and heels, phone and purse in hand. The emerald nightdress lay discarded like shed skin. "Georgia, don't be dramatic." Joel stood, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Dramatic?" She laughed darker now. "I've been patient, Joel, loyal, understanding, everything a good wife is supposed to be, but I will not be humiliated in my own home." She pressed the elevator button, hand steady despite the earthquake inside. "You're making a mistake," Joel said, voice threatening. "Everything you have because of me. This life, this status, it's all mine, Georgia. Walk out that door and you'll have nothing." The elevator chimed. Georgia stepped inside and turned to face them, Joel with rising anger, Amy with her clutched baby and confused eyes. She memorized this tableau of betrayal. "We'll see about that," Georgia said softly. "Won't we, Joel?" The doors closed on his shocked face and Amy's whispered question. Georgia pulled out her phone as the elevator descended. scrolling to a number she'd saved months ago when instinct whispered something was wrong in London. The phone rang twice. Matthew Fisher Law Offices. Mr. Fisher, this is Georgia Prestwidge. We spoke months ago about a consultation. I'm ready to move forward. A pause, then warmth entered his tone. Not pity, respect. Mrs. Prestwidge, I've been waiting for your call. When can you come in? Tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. And Mr. Fisher, I need you to be very, very good at what you do. I am, he said simply. And from what you told me about your situation, you're going to need someone who is. Georgia ended the call and stood on the Manhattan sidewalk, cold air sharp, snowflakes catching in her hair. Somewhere above, Joel was probably celebrating his victory, explaining to Amy how he'd handled his difficult first wife. He had no idea the empire was hers. He had no idea she'd saved his company from bankruptcy more times than he could count. He had no idea Georgia Prestwidge had spent 3 years not just waiting, but watching, planning, preparing for the possibility that the man she loved might not be the man she'd married. A cab pulled up. Georgia slid into the back seat, giving the driver her hotel's name. Always have a backup plan. Her father had taught her that before he died. Never put all your faith in one person, one plan, one future. She'd forgotten that lesson when she fell in love with Joel Paris. She wouldn't forget again. As the cab pulled away, Georgia allowed herself one moment of weakness, one moment where her hand pressed against her chest as if holding her breaking heart together, one moment where tears burned and her throat closed with grief. Then she blinked, straightened her spine, and began making mental notes for Matthew Fisher. Joel Paris had made the biggest mistake of his life tonight, and Georgia Prestwidge was going to make absolutely certain he understood that. 3 days. She'd give him 3 days to feel like he'd won. Then she'd show him what a real queen looked like when she stopped pretending to be powerless. The game had just begun, and this time Georgia was playing to win. Chapter 2. The Secret Queen. I own his company, Mr. Fisher. Every brick, every contract, every dollar of success he thinks he built, it's mine, and he has absolutely no idea. Matthew Fisher's pen stopped mid-stroke across the legal pad, his dark eyes lifting to meet Georgia's across the polished mahogany desk. Outside his 42nd floor windows, Manhattan glittered in the December morning light, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped in his office. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? His voice remained professionally calm, but Georgia caught the flicker of shock he couldn't quite hide. She sat in the leather chair across from him, wearing the same black dress from last night because she hadn't had the strength to do anything but collapse in her hotel room after leaving Joel. Her eyes were dry now, all tears spent in the dark hours before dawn. What remained was clarity, cold, sharp, unforgiving clarity. 60% of Paris manufacturing belongs to me, Georgia said, her voice steady as steel. Through shell companies, offshore accounts, and investment firms Joel's never heard of. I've owned the majority stake for almost 10 years. My husband thinks he's a self-made success. Really, he's been living off my money since the day we married. Matthew leaned back in his chair, studying her with new intensity. Start from the beginning. All of it. So she did. Georgia told him about meeting Joel 15 years ago when she was a financial analyst and he was the charming heir to a failing manufacturing company. How his father had died leaving debts that would sink them within months. How Joel had been terrified but too proud to admit it. I had a trust fund from my father, Georgia explained, $18 million. Joel knew I had money, but I told him it was only $2 million. I used that small amount to save his first major contract, told him it was a loan from my savings. He never questioned it. And the rest? I invested it, quietly, carefully. Tech companies in the early 2000s, real estate before the crash recovery, pharmaceutical startups. By the time Paris manufacturing faced its next crisis 10 years ago, my personal portfolio was worth over $100 million. Matthew's expression shifted from professional interest to genuine amazement. And you used it to buy his company? Investors were fleeing. Joel was desperate, calling in favors, mortgaging everything. I created Prestwidge Holdings, registered it in Delaware, funneled money through 3 intermediary companies, and started buying shares. Over 5 years, I acquired 60%. Joel thinks the company is owned by an international consortium. He has no idea the consortium is me. She pulled a folder from her bag, slid it across the desk. Matthew opened it to find corporate documents, share certificates, offshore account statements. His hands moved through the papers with increasing speed, his legal mind clearly connecting dots. Jesus Christ, he breathed. You're not just wealthy, Georgia. You're a billionaire. 400 million last I checked, most of it tied up in investments but liquid enough to access when needed. She met his eyes. 5 years ago, Joel almost lost his biggest contract, Dubai manufacturer, $50 million. He came home celebrating after the client agreed to terms, told me how he'd charmed them with his presentation. But that's not what happened. The client was pulling out. They didn't trust Joel's numbers. I flew to Dubai the day before the meeting, used connections from my father's old business network, spent 3 days restructuring the deal, personally guaranteeing certain terms with my own capital. The contract was signed because of me. Joel never knew I was there. Matthew was taking notes now, his pen flying across the page. How many times have you done this? 17 major deals in the past decade. Every time Joel thought he'd landed a huge client through his negotiation skills, I was working behind the scenes. Phone calls to CEOs who knew my father. Private meetings to restructure terms. Sometimes I'd invest directly in the client company just to ensure they'd sign with Paris Manufacturing. Her laugh was bitter. I've spent 15 years making my husband look like a genius while erasing my own footprints. Why? The question was soft, not judgmental. Why hide it? Georgia looked out at the city, at the thousands of windows reflecting winter sun. Because I thought that's what love was, making yourself invisible so he could shine. My mother died when I was young. My father raised me to be strong, independent, brilliant, but he also taught me that men need to feel like providers, protectors. So when I fell in love with Joel, I thought supporting him meant hiding my own strength. That's not love, Georgia. That's sacrifice without appreciation. The words hit something deep in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't speak. When she found her voice again, it was rough. I know that now. Last night, when he brought her home, when he threatened to leave me with nothing, she stopped, steadied herself. I realized he never loved me. He loved what I could do for him. The difference is everything. Matthew set down his pen, his gaze direct and intense. I'm going to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. What do you want from this divorce? Everything he thinks he owns, because it's already mine. We can do that. The prenup he mentioned is worthless. It protects his premarital assets. But Paris Manufacturing wasn't his premarital asset. His father's company was bankrupt when we married. Everything that exists now was built with my money. The prenup protects nothing because there's nothing of his to protect. A smile crossed Matthew's face, sharp and predatory. He has no idea what's about to hit him, does he? None whatsoever. And Mr. Fisher? I want to keep it that way as long as possible. Let him think he's won. Let him settle into my penthouse with his new family. I want him comfortable, confident, convinced I'm just a scorned wife who'll take her settlement and disappear quietly. And then we show him exactly who Georgia Prestwidge is when she stops pretending to be powerless. Matthew stood, extended his hand across the desk. I'll start filing paperwork today. But Georgia, you need to understand. When this goes public, Joel will fight back. He'll try to destroy your reputation, claim you're unstable, vindictive. It's going to get ugly. She took his hand, her grip firm. I've been underestimated my entire life, Mr. Fisher. I'm used to fighting from a position people assume is weak. The difference is this time I'm not hiding anymore. Call me Matthew. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. Then you should know, Matthew. I expect absolute discretion. No one can know about my assets until I'm ready to reveal them. Can you guarantee that? Attorney-client privilege is sacred to me. Your secrets are safe. He hesitated. Though I have to ask, do you have any allies? Friends who know the truth? Georgia thought about the question. Her college roommate Sarah, now CEO of Burton Industries. A few business contacts who knew her as a savvy investor but not Joel's wife. Her father's old lawyer who'd helped set up the original trusts. A few people who know me as an investor, not as Mrs. Joel Paris. You might need them before this is over. Joel won't go down without trying to take you with him. Let him try. Georgia gathered her bag, preparing to leave. I've been invisible for 15 years. I'm very good at it. But Matthew, when I decide to be seen, the whole city will know my name. As she walked to the elevator, Matthew called after her. Georgia, for what it's worth, your father would be proud. You didn't just inherit his money. You multiplied it while saving someone else's legacy. That takes brilliance. The words settled somewhere warm in her chest, the first kindness she'd felt since Joel's return. She turned back, offered a small smile. Thank you. I hope I can live up to that assessment. In the elevator descending to street level, Georgia pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from Joel, 2 from a number she didn't recognize. She deleted them without listening. Instead, she dialed a number she knew by heart. Burton Industries, CEO's office. Sarah, it's Georgia. I need a favor. Chapter 3. The Counter-Strike. Joel Paris discovered the frozen accounts at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning, standing in line at his favorite coffee shop with Amy beside him, the baby fussing in her arms, while Joel Jr. tugged at his father's hand, demanding a chocolate croissant. I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined, the barista said, professional smile not quite hiding her discomfort. Joel frowned, pulled out another card, Black American Express, the one that never declined. Try this one. Same result. Then another, and another. By the 4th declined card, Amy was staring at him with growing alarm, and the line behind them was getting restless. I'll pay cash, Joel muttered, pulling out his wallet to find exactly $43. He paid for the coffees and pastries, ushered Amy and the children outside into the December cold, and immediately called his bank. The conversation that followed turned his blood to ice. I'm sorry, Mr. Paris, but those accounts are currently frozen pending legal review. I suggest you contact your attorney. Frozen? By whose authority? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, sir. You'll need to speak with legal. Joel hung up, his hand shaking. He looked at Amy, who was watching him with the baby drooling on her shoulder and fear creeping into her green eyes. It's fine, he said, trying to sound confident. Just a banking error. I'll sort it out. But it wasn't fine. By noon, he'd discovered that every joint account he shared with Georgia had been emptied or frozen. The credit cards in both their names, frozen. The line of credit against the penthouse, frozen. Even his corporate account at Paris Manufacturing showed a hold pending ownership verification. What the hell is going on? He demanded to his lawyer, pacing the penthouse, while Amy tried to keep the children quiet in the next room. Your wife filed for divorce this morning, his attorney Marcus Bennett said over the phone, and she's requesting a full financial discovery. Apparently she claims the joint accounts were actually her personal accounts added to for convenience. She's within her rights to freeze them pending resolution. That's insane! Those are my accounts! Actually, Joel, looking at the paperwork, the accounts were opened in her name 15 years ago. You were added as an authorized user. Technically, they're her accounts. Joel felt the floor tilt beneath him. That can't be right. I've been using those accounts for our entire marriage. With her permission, which she's now revoking. Look, It's a power play. She's trying to scare you. We'll file a motion for temporary support, get you access to marital funds. How long will that take? Few weeks, maybe a month, depending on court schedules. Joel hung up and looked around the penthouse. His penthouse. The home he'd worked 15 years to afford, the crown jewel of his success. Except the mortgage statement he'd pulled up on his laptop showed Georgia's name as primary owner. How had he never noticed that? Amy appeared in the doorway, Madison crying against her shoulder. "Joel, I tried to order groceries and my card was declined too, the one you gave me." "It's just temporary," he snapped, then caught himself. "Sorry, I'm sorry. This is just Georgia being vindictive. She's hurt, lashing out. It'll be resolved soon." "Maybe we should go to my parents' place for a while," Amy said quietly. "Just until this settles down. I don't think we should be in her home while—" "This is my home!" Joel's voice came out louder than intended, and Joel Jr. started crying in the next room. He took a breath, lowered his voice. "I'm not going to let her push us out. She's the one who walked away. She doesn't get to control what happens here." But even as he said it, Joel felt control slipping through his fingers like water. By late afternoon, he'd maxed out the 3 credit cards that were solely in his name. Cards he'd thought were emergency backup, but now represented his only liquid access to funds. $7,000 total. For a man used to spending that on a weekend trip to the Hamptons, it felt like poverty. He called Georgia's cell. Voicemail. He called again. Again. Finally, on the 5th attempt, she answered. "What do you want, Joel?" Her voice was cold, unfamiliar. This wasn't the Georgia who'd waited for him, who'd supported every decision, who'd said yes to everything he'd ever asked. This was someone new, someone he didn't know. "You froze our accounts," he said, trying to keep his voice reasonable. "Georgia, I understand you're upset, but we have bills to pay. The household staff, utilities, my car payment. Those are your problems now, Joel. You wanted me gone. I'm gone. Deal with the consequences." "Don't be childish. We can't just—" "I'll be by tomorrow at noon to collect some of my things. Make sure you and your family aren't there. I don't want to see any of you." "Georgia, please, can we just talk about this like adults? Last night was rushed, emotional. I handled it badly, but we can work this out." "Work it out." Her laugh was sharp. "You brought your mistress and children to my home and demanded I accept them. Now you want to work it out? Amy's not my mistress. She's my wife. And I'm still your wife too, legally, which is about to change. Expect to be served papers tomorrow." "Georgia, wait." The line went dead. Joel stood in the center of the penthouse, phone clutched in his hand, feeling his world narrow to a point. Around him, Amy tried to soothe a crying baby, while Joel Jr. destroyed a box of expensive chocolates he'd found in the kitchen. The housekeeper had left hours ago. Apparently Georgia had been the one paying her salary directly. The lights in the east wing flickered, and Joel made a mental note to call maintenance before remembering he didn't know if he could even authorize repairs anymore. His phone buzzed. A text from his business partner, David Chen. "Board meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. Questions about the divorce situation." Another text, this from his mother in Connecticut. "Heard about Amy and the children. Call me immediately." Then another from an unknown number. "This is Catherine Wright from the New York Chronicle. We'd like to speak with you about your separation from Georgia Prestwidge. Please call at your earliest convenience." The media. Of course, the media had found out. Georgia Prestwidge might have stayed in his shadow, but she had connections. Social circles. People who knew her as more than just Joel Paris's wife. Joel poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, George's expensive scotch because his own had run out months ago, and sat on the leather sofa, the same sofa where just last night he'd explained his modern arrangement, the same sofa where Georgia had looked at him like he was a stranger. He'd miscalculated. He'd thought she would fight, cry, maybe threaten, but ultimately accept reality. Women always did, didn't they? His father had said as much. They might rage at first, but they always come back. They have too much to lose. But Georgia had walked out without looking back, and now Joel was beginning to suspect she had a lot less to lose than he'd assumed. His phone rang. Marcus again. "Joel, we have a problem. I just reviewed the property records. The penthouse is titled to Georgia Prestwidge, personally, purchased 14 years ago. You're listed as an occupant, not an owner." "That's impossible. I've been paying the mortgage." "You've been contributing to expenses, but the mortgage and deed are in her name. Joel, I need to ask you something important. How much of your current lifestyle is actually funded by your income versus Georgia's money?" Joel opened his mouth to answer confidently, then stopped. The penthouse was hers. The accounts were hers. The cars, he'd have to check the registration, but knowing Georgia's attention to detail, probably hers. His mind raced back through 15 years of marriage, trying to remember who'd paid for what, whose name was on which documents. "I make $700,000 a year as CEO of Paris Manufacturing," he said finally, "plus bonuses. I'm not exactly broke, Marcus." "No, but if Georgia controls the marital assets, your $700,000 won't cover your current expenses. That penthouse alone costs $40,000 a month with taxes and fees." "Then we'll move," Joel said, hearing the desperation creeping into his voice. "Rent something smaller until this is settled." "With what money? Your salary goes into the joint account that's now frozen. We can file for emergency access, but Joel, I'm going to be straight with you. If Georgia's lawyer is halfway competent, they're going to make this very difficult. The wife who walks away usually gets the sympathy. The husband who brought home a second family, not so much." Joel ended the call and drained his scotch. In the next room, Amy was singing softly to Madison, some lullaby that sounded sad. Joel Jr. had fallen asleep on the floor, surrounded by chocolate wrappers. This was supposed to be simple. He'd fallen in love with someone new, started a family, and now needed to reorganize his life accordingly. Georgia was supposed to understand. She'd always understood before. Instead, she'd declared war, and Joel was beginning to realize he didn't know his enemy at all. Chapter 4. Walls closing. In the board meeting started at 10 sharp in the Paris Manufacturing Conference Room, 15 people seated around imported Italian marble while rain pelted the windows and turned Manhattan grey. Joel sat at the head of the table where he'd always sat, but something felt different today. The weight of their stares, the absence of the usual warm greetings. David Chen cleared his throat, shuffling papers. "Let's address the elephant in the room. Joel, we've all seen the news about your separation from Georgia. We want to understand how this might impact the company." "It won't," Joel said firmly. "My personal life is separate from business. Paris Manufacturing's performance speaks for itself." "Does it?" This from Margaret Torres, CFO, a woman in her 60s who'd been with the company almost as long as Joel. "Because I've been reviewing our major contracts from the past decade and something interesting emerged. Many of our biggest clients have direct connections to Georgia. Burton Industries, Sarah Burton was Georgia's college roommate. Wexler Group, the CEO served on a charity board with Georgia. Consolidated Dynamics, their VP of Operations is Georgia's second cousin." Joel felt ice form in his stomach. "Connections don't mean—" "It means," Margaret interrupted, "that we need to ensure these clients remain loyal to Paris Manufacturing if Georgia is no longer affiliated with the company. Have you reached out to them?" "I will. Today. This is a non-issue." "Is it?" David leaned forward. "Because Sarah Burton's assistant called yesterday, asking about Georgia's continued involvement with our operations. When I told her Georgia was no longer active in company decisions, she mentioned Burton Industries might need to reassess the partnership." "That's a $40 million annual contract, Joel." The room went silent except for rain against glass. Joel's collar felt tight. "I'll call Sarah personally. We have an excellent relationship. One conversation will—" "What relationship?" Margaret pulled out another file. I checked the meeting logs. Every interaction with Burton Industries for the past 8 years has been coordinated by Georgia. She attended site visits, quarterly reviews, contract negotiations. You met Sarah Burton exactly twice, both times at charity galas with Georgia present. That's not... Joel stopped. Was that true? He'd thought he knew Sarah, thought the Burton Industries contract was his success. But now that Margaret said it, he couldn't remember a single one-on-one meeting. Couldn't remember closing that deal at all. Just Georgia saying it was handled, contracts arriving for his signature, him taking credit at board meetings. "We're not here to attack you," David said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We're here to protect the company. If Georgia has been instrumental in maintaining client relationships, we need a transition plan. And Joel, we need to understand the financial implications of your divorce. Do you have any ownership stake that might be affected?" "Of course I have ownership. I'm the CEO. I inherited controlling shares from my father." Margaret and David exchanged a look that made Joel's blood run cold. "Joel," Margaret said carefully, "your father's company was bankrupt when he died. The current Paris manufacturing was essentially rebuilt from nothing. Who funded that rebuilding? Company investors, traditional financing. Can you name these investors?" Joel opened his mouth, then closed it. He'd never actually met most of the investors. Everything had been handled through intermediaries, legal firms, corporate structures that Georgia's father's old lawyer had set up. Georgia had explained it all once, something about favorable tax treatment and international investment laws, but Joel hadn't paid close attention. He'd just been grateful for the capital infusion that saved his legacy. "There's a consortium," he said finally, "Delaware registered. Prestwidge Holdings is the main entity, but it represents several international investors." "Prestwidge Holdings," David repeated slowly, "as in Georgia Prestwidge. It's just coincidence. Her father had similar investment companies. This is separate." "Is it?" Margaret slid a document across the table. "I pulled the corporate registration this morning. Prestwidge Holdings owns 60% of Paris Manufacturing. You own 12%. The remaining shares are scattered among smaller investors." The room tilted. Joel stared at the document, at his name with 12% next to it, at Prestwidge Holdings with 60%. "This can't be right. I'm the CEO. I have controlling interest." "You have CEO authority granted by the majority shareholder, which is Prestwidge Holdings. Joel, did you ever actually verify who owns that entity?" Of course he hadn't. Why would he? Georgia was his wife, his partner. Her father's companies had saved him when he needed it most. He'd assumed it was all properly structured, all in his favor, because that's how it was supposed to work. Husbands controlled the businesses, wives supported from the sidelines. "I need to review my files," Joel said, standing abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned." "Joel, wait!" David started, but Joel was already walking out, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Back in his office, he tore through filing cabinets looking for the original incorporation documents, found them buried under years of quarterly reports, read through page after page of legal language that might as well have been Sanskrit. There, ownership structure, Prestwidge Holdings, 60%, Paris Family Trust, Joel Paris trustee, 12%, various minority investors, 28%. "But who owned Prestwidge Holdings?" Joel called his lawyer. "Marcus, I need you to find out who owns Prestwidge Holdings, the investment company that holds majority stake in Paris Manufacturing." "When do you need this?" "Yesterday. Marcus, I think..." Joel stopped, unable to say it out loud. "Just find out, please." He hung up and stared out his office window at the rain-soaked city. 15 years ago, when Paris Manufacturing was drowning, Georgia had suggested they bring in outside investors. She'd known a lawyer who specialized in corporate restructuring. Everything had been handled so smoothly, so efficiently. Money appeared exactly when they needed it. Contracts were saved. The company stabilized, then thrived. Joel had thought he was a brilliant businessman, leading an impressive turnaround. What if he'd been a puppet all along? His phone buzzed. A text from Amy. Baby formula is almost out. Can you send money? Another from his mother. Your father would be ashamed. Call me. Another from an unknown number. Mr. Paris, this is Tracy Chen from the Wall Street Journal. We're running a story about Georgia Prestwidge's business holdings and would like your comment. Business holdings. Georgia's business holdings. The phrase rattled around Joel's skull like a stone in a can. Then Marcus called back. Joel, I can't get clear information on Prestwidge Holdings ownership. It's a Delaware corporation with registered agents, but the beneficial owners are protected by privacy statutes. I'd need a court order to pierce that veil, and even then, it's Georgia, Joel said flatly. Isn't it? She owns it. She owns my company. Silence on the line. Then, I don't know, Joel, but I think we need to prepare for that possibility. Joel hung up and put his head in his hands. The office around him suddenly felt borrowed. The desk where he'd signed multi-million-dollar deals, the view he'd thought he'd earned, the nameplate that said CEO, all of it potentially belonging to someone else, to his wife, to the woman he'd brought Amy home to, the woman he'd threatened with nothing, the woman he'd assumed would crumble because women always did, the woman who was proving to be nothing like he'd imagined. His phone rang again. This time he answered without checking the caller ID. Joel Paris. His own voice sounded hollow. Joel, it's Sarah Burton. We need to talk about our contract with Paris Manufacturing. And just like that, the walls started closing in. Chapter 5. The truth unfolds. Georgia stood at the window of her hotel suite watching snow fall over Central Park when the package arrived. The concierge had called it a confidential delivery, which meant Matthew had sent his investigators' final report. She'd been waiting for this, dreading it too. Inside the manila envelope, photographs, dozens of them. Joel and Amy in London 3 years ago, not 18 months like he'd claimed. Amy visibly pregnant at an outdoor cafe, Joel's hand on her belly. The date stamp in the corner, 2 years and 8 months ago. More photos. Joel pushing a stroller through Hyde Park. Joel Jr. couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Date stamp, 2 years and 3 months. Another, Joel at a London hospital holding a newborn. The placard visible in the background. Welcome baby Joel Jr. Paris. Date, 2 years and 4 months ago. Georgia's hands shook as she laid the photographs across the hotel suite's desk in chronological order. The timeline assembled itself like a prosecution exhibit. Joel had been with Amy for at least 3 years, had gotten her pregnant almost immediately, had been living a complete double life while Georgia waited in Manhattan, believing every excuse, every lie. The broken leg that prevented travel? Fiction. The photos showed Joel playing with Joel Jr. in a park, both legs working fine. The critical investor meetings that kept him in London? Half of them never happened. Matthew's investigator had checked with the companies. Some meetings had been quick video calls, others didn't exist at all. 3 years of systematic deception. 3 years of I love you and just a few more weeks, while he built an entire family across the ocean. Georgia sat heavily on the sofa, the photographs spread before her like evidence of her own stupidity. How had she not known? She was brilliant at reading people, at seeing beneath surfaces, but with Joel, she'd been blind, willfully blind maybe, choosing belief over suspicion because the alternative hurt too much. Her phone rang. Matthew. Did you get the package? He asked. I'm looking at it now. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat, hollow. He's been lying from the start. The whole thing, Matthew. Every word. I know, I'm sorry. There's more in the written report. My investigator talked to people at Joel's London office. Amy Edgar was his executive assistant. She'd been working for him about 6 months when they started the affair. When she got pregnant, Joel panicked. He married her quickly, a civil ceremony with 2 witnesses, told her you and he were separated, that the divorce was just paperwork. She believed him. She was 25, pregnant and in love with her boss. Yes, she believed him. Matthew paused. Georgia, Amy's not the villain here. She's a victim too. Joel lied to both of you. Georgia knew Matthew was right, but it didn't make the photographs any easier to look at. Didn't make the betrayal hurt less. What else is in the report? Joel's been in financial trouble for about 18 months. He took out personal loans against his Paris manufacturing salary, about $400,000 worth. Used it to maintain 2 households, support Amy and the children. He's been living beyond his means for years, and now the loans are coming due. Let me guess, he thought marrying Amy officially and bringing her to the penthouse would solve his problems. 1 household instead of 2. My money supporting everyone. Exactly. And Georgia, there's something else. Remember how Joel claimed his leg was broken and he couldn't travel? The excuse he used for 8 months. I found hospital records. He did go to a hospital in London, but not for a broken leg, for a paternity test. He wanted to confirm Joel Jr. was his before committing to Amy permanently. The cruelty of it stole Georgia's breath. While she'd been worried sick about his supposed injury, he'd been verifying parentage of his secret child. I want copies of everything. Medical records, financial documents, all of it. Already prepared. Georgia, this gives us significant leverage. Joel committed fraud by claiming injury to avoid marital obligations. He's also been potentially embezzling from Paris manufacturing to support his double life. If you want to destroy him, I don't know what I want anymore, Georgia admitted, and the confession felt like weakness. She hated it. I spent 15 years loving a man who never existed. The Joel I married was a fiction. This stranger in the photographs? I don't even know him. Then let me help you figure out what you want. But right now you need to get out of that hotel room. You've been alone too long. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're processing 3 years of betrayal in 24 hours. I'm coming over. Matthew, that's not necessary. I'm already in a cab. Order room service. You need to eat something. He hung up before she could argue. Georgia sat among the scattered photographs, part of her wanting to protest his presumption, another part grateful not to be alone with the evidence of her broken marriage. When Matthew arrived 30 minutes later, he took one look at her face, and the photographs spread across every surface, and his professional demeanor cracked. Georgia, God, I'm sorry. Don't. She held up a hand. If you're kind to me right now, I'll fall apart, and I can't afford to fall apart yet. He nodded, sat across from her, and began methodically organizing the photographs into categories. Evidence of timeline, evidence of lies, evidence of financial strain. His hands were steady, his voice calm as he explained what each document proved. It helped. The clinical approach gave her something to hold on to instead of drowning in emotion. Here's what I think happened, Matthew said after they'd reviewed everything. Joel started the affair 3 years ago, got Amy pregnant, married her impulsively, then realized he'd made a massive mistake because he needed your money. So he created this elaborate fiction about expansion and injury to buy time while he figured out how to have both families. When Amy got pregnant again and his debts came due, he ran out of options. His solution was to bring everyone under one roof and force you to accept it. Except I didn't accept it. You called his bluff, and now he's realizing the prenup he thought would protect him is worthless. The company he thought he owned isn't his, and the wife he thought would roll over is a billionaire with very good lawyers. Georgia looked at Matthew, really looked at him for the first time since he'd arrived. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up, dark hair slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, concerned, and there was something in his eyes when he watched her that made her chest tight. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You're a divorce attorney. You don't make house calls to hold clients' hands." Matthew was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because you remind me of my ex-wife. Not in personality, you're nothing like her, but in situation. When we divorced 5 years ago, I thought I was the wronged party. She'd changed, become distant, focused on her career instead of our marriage. I blamed her for everything. What changed your mind? About a year later, I found old emails. Discovered she'd been carrying our entire household financially while I built my practice. I'd been so focused on becoming successful that I never noticed she was already successful. She didn't leave because she changed. She left because I never saw her. I was in love with the idea of a supportive wife, not the actual brilliant woman I'd married. He met Georgia's eyes. I won't let Joel do to you what I did to Claire. You deserve someone who sees you. The words hung in the air between them. Georgia felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with vindication or victory. Matthew... I'm not saying this for any reason except you need to hear it, he continued quickly. You're extraordinary, Georgia. Brilliant and strong and more generous than he ever deserved. When this is over, you're going to rebuild your life. And whoever you choose to share it with, better worship the ground you walk on. Because anything less is theft. Tears burned behind Georgia's eyes, the first real tears since she'd left the penthouse. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. Every time I look at these photos, I think about how stupid I was, how many signs I missed, how easily I believed. That's not stupidity. That's love. And love isn't weakness, Georgia. Trusting the wrong person is painful, but closing yourself off to everyone? That's the real tragedy. Spoken like a divorce lawyer trying to talk himself out of business. Matthew laughed, the tension breaking. Spoken like someone who learned this lesson the hard way and doesn't want you to make the same mistake. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Matthew organizing documents, while Georgia picked at the room service he'd ordered. Finally, she asked, "What happens next?" "Next, we prepare for war. Joel's going to fight back when he realizes what he's up against. He'll try to claim you stole from him, that you manipulated him, that you're vindictive and unstable. We need to control the narrative before he does." How? By being strategic, calculated. Every move planned 3 steps ahead. Matthew pulled out his tablet. "Here's what I'm proposing. Next week, there's the Paris Manufacturing Annual Christmas Party. Big social event, all the major clients and investors. Joel will expect you to skip it, to hide in shame. Instead, I think you should attend." "And do what?" "Remind everyone who you really are, not Joel's wronged wife, not a victim. Georgia Prestwidge, the woman who's been the real power behind Paris Manufacturing for years. Make them remember. Make them choose." A slow smile crossed Georgia's face. The first genuine smile since Joel had walked through her door with his new family. "You want me to take the battle to him, on his territory." "Our territory? That company is 60% yours. You have more right to be there than he does." "He'll be there with Amy, playing happy family, using my humiliation as proof that he's moved on. Let him try. Georgia, you've been invisible for 15 years by choice. One night of being fully visible, you'll shatter everything he thinks he knows." She thought about it. The Christmas party. Joel's biggest annual event, where he schmoozed clients and basked in their admiration. Where everyone would expect broken, devastated Georgia to hide away. What if she showed up instead? Powerful, confident, utterly unbroken. "I'll need a new dress," she said. Matthew's smile was fierce. "I know an excellent stylist." "And Georgia? Joel Paris has no idea what's about to hit him." After Matthew left, Georgia stood at the window again, watching the city lights. In her reflection, she saw someone new. Not the devoted wife who'd waited 3 years. Not the invisible woman who'd built empires in secret. Someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who'd been asleep for 15 years and was finally, terrifyingly awake. Joel wanted war. He was about to learn what happened when you went to battle against a queen. Chapter 6. The Christmas Gambit. The dress arrived on Wednesday, delivered in tissue paper and hushed reverence. Georgia unwrapped it in her hotel suite while Matthew watched from the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Try it on," he said. She disappeared into the bedroom, emerged 5 minutes later, and watched Matthew's careful neutrality shatter completely. The gown was deep burgundy, almost black in certain light, with a neckline that suggested power rather than seduction. It moved like liquid when she walked, catching light and throwing it back, transformed. "Joel's going to lose his mind when he sees you," Matthew said quietly. "Good." Georgia studied herself in the mirror, seeing echoes of the woman her father had raised. Strong, unapologetic, unafraid. "What time does the party start?" 7. "Joel and Amy will arrive at 7:30. Fashionably late so everyone notices their entrance. I suggest we arrive at 6:45. "You're coming." Matthew straightened his tie. "As your attorney and escort, yes, if that's acceptable." Something warm flickered in Georgia's chest, but she pushed it down. Not yet. Not until this was finished. "It's acceptable. But Matthew, once we're inside, work alone. I need them to see me as independent, not hiding behind anyone." "Understood. I'll fade into the background. But Georgia?" He stepped closer. "If you need me, look for me. I'll be watching." The words settled somewhere deep, and for a moment Georgia almost let herself lean into what she saw in his eyes. Almost. Then she remembered Joel's eyes looking at her the same way once, remembered believing in promises that turned to ash, and she stepped back. "I should finish getting ready." Matthew nodded, understanding flashing across his face. "I'll pick you up at 6:30. The hours until the party crawled past like wounded things. Georgia spent them preparing not just her appearance but her strategy. She called Sarah Burton, her college roommate and CEO of Burton Industries. "Sarah, it's Georgia. I know you've heard about Joel and me." "Honey, everyone's heard. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I need a favor." "The Christmas party tonight. I want you to remember our college days. Remember who I was before I became Mrs. Joel Paris. Can you do that?" Sarah's voice turned thoughtful. "You want me to remind people that Georgia Prestwidge existed before Joel?" "Exactly. Consider it done. And Georgia, about damn time you stopped hiding your light under his bushel." Next call, Harrison Wexler, CEO of Wexler Group. Then Diane Chen from Consolidated Dynamics. Each conversation carefully calibrated, planting seeds without being obvious. By the time Matthew picked her up at 6:30, Georgia had laid groundwork that would pay dividends once the party started. The Paris manufacturing Christmas party took place in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers and old money pretending to be comfortable with new. Georgia stepped out of the car, Matthew's hand at her elbow, and felt every eye in the valet area turn toward her. Good. Let them look. Let them see Georgia Prestwidge in full armor. Inside, the party was already filling with early arrivals, board members, senior management, their spouses navigating complex social calculations about which team to support in the Paris divorce. Georgia moved through them like a ship through still water, her smile calm, her greetings warm, but not desperate. "Georgia," Sarah Burton appeared from the crowd, stunning in emerald green, and pulled her into a hug that felt like solidarity. "You look incredible, like yourself again." "Thank you for being here," Georgia murmured. "Are you kidding? Wouldn't miss it?" Sarah kept her arm linked through Georgia's as they moved into the main ballroom. "How are you really? Ask me after tonight." The ballroom was spectacular. 3-story ceilings gilt everything, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. A string quartet played Mozart in one corner, while waiters circulated with champagne. Georgia accepted a glass and positioned herself near the center of the room, visible but not performing, just existing in her own space. People approached carefully at first. Margaret Torres from the board, offering condolences that felt more like curiosity. David Chen asking if she was holding up all right. Georgia answered with grace and minimal detail, watching them try to figure out where she stood, what she wanted, whose side would win. She wanted them uncertain. Uncertainty made people reveal truths. At 7:20, Harrison Wexler approached with his wife. Georgia, I've been meaning to call you. That deal we closed 5 years ago, the semiconductor contract. I was telling Rebecca about how you brokered it. Remember that dinner in Tokyo? 3 days of negotiations. Georgia did remember. Joel had been scheduled to go but claimed food poisoning at the last minute. Georgia had flown out, spent 72 hours in brutal meetings, and closed a $40 million deal. Joel had taken credit when she returned. I remember, she said carefully. Best negotiator I've ever worked with, Harrison continued, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. My team still talks about how you structured those payment terms. Pure genius. You were the lead on that deal? Someone asked, a journalist Georgia recognized from industry publications. Before she could answer, Diane Chen appeared. Georgia was lead on most of our major deals. The Consolidated Dynamics contract 3 years ago, all her. Joel signed the paperwork, but Georgia did the heavy lifting. We almost pulled out before she intervened. The journalist was taking notes now. Georgia felt the narrative shifting, watched comprehension dawn on faces around her. She'd been invisible so long that people had forgotten she existed. Now they were remembering, and then the room went quiet. Georgia didn't need to turn around to know Joel had arrived. She felt his presence like a change in air pressure. That familiar shift that used to mean comfort, and now meant something else entirely. She turned slowly. Joel stood at the ballroom entrance in a tuxedo, looking every inch the successful CEO, his hand at Amy's waist. Amy wore cream-colored silk, her belly just starting to show with her 3rd pregnancy, her strawberry blonde hair perfect. Joel Jr. wasn't visible, probably with a sitter, but their presence as a family unit was clear. This was Joel's statement. I've moved on. I'm happy. Look at my beautiful new family. His eyes found Georgia across the crowded room, and she watched his confidence falter, just for a second, just long enough for her to see that he'd expected her to be broken, diminished, hiding, not standing in the center of his party, wearing power like a second skin. Amy whispered something, her face uncertain. Joel's jaw tightened. Then he did exactly what Georgia had known he would do. He headed straight for her, Amy trailing slightly behind, determined to confront this head-on and control the narrative. The crowd parted. Conversations died. Everyone watching the soon-to-be ex-spouses meet for the first time in public since the split. Georgia, Joel's voice was carefully neutral. I didn't expect to see you here. It's the Paris Manufacturing Christmas party, she replied evenly. I'm part of Paris Manufacturing. Why wouldn't I be here? I thought, given the circumstances. The circumstances? George's eyebrow arched. You mean your marriage to Amy? That's your personal choice, Joel. It has nothing to do with my professional relationships. Amy flinched at the word professional, and Georgia almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But Amy had made choices too, had believed Joel's lies and moved into another woman's home. Perhaps we should speak privately, Joel said, his smile tight. I don't think so. We have lawyers for private conversations now. Georgia, don't make a scene. I'm not making anything, Joel. I'm simply attending a party. You're the one who seems uncomfortable. She glanced at Amy. How are you feeling? That's your 3rd pregnancy, isn't it? That must be exhausting. The calculation was cold and deliberate. Georgia saw Amy's face flush, saw Joel's anger flash before he controlled it. She was being publicly gracious while privately devastating, and everyone watching understood the subtext perfectly. We should greet other guests, Joel said, his hand tightening on Amy's waist. Excuse us. They moved away, and Georgia felt rather than saw Matthew in the crowd, his slight nod of approval. Round 1 to her. For the next hour, Georgia worked the room with surgical precision. She didn't badmouth Joel, didn't play victim, didn't explain or defend. She simply existed as herself, brilliant, connected, powerful. And slowly, inexorably, the party's gravity shifted from Joel to her. Sarah Burton told the story of Georgia's academic brilliance in college, how she'd graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and international business. Harrison Wexler shared details of the Tokyo negotiations. Diane Chen described Georgia's revolutionary approach to supply chain restructuring. Each story built on the last until a picture emerged. Georgia Prestwidge wasn't just Joel's supportive wife. She was a formidable businesswoman who'd been operating in the shadows while Joel basked in her light. By 8:30, Joel's carefully constructed image as self-made success was cracking at the seams. Georgia watched him notice, watched him try to redirect conversations, watched his frustration mount as people kept turning back to her. Then Margaret Torres approached the microphone. As CFO, she was supposed to give the annual thank you speech to employees and clients. Georgia had known about this, had prepared for it. What she hadn't prepared for was Margaret's deviation from the script. "Before we begin dinner," Margaret said, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "I want to acknowledge someone whose contributions to Paris manufacturing have been extraordinary and, frankly, underappreciated. Georgia Prestwidge, could you join me, please?" Georgia's heart stopped. This wasn't planned. She glanced at Matthew, who looked equally surprised, then at Joel, whose face had gone white. She walked to the front of the room, the crowd parting, champagne glasses pausing mid-sip. Margaret smiled at her, then addressed the room. "Many of you know Georgia as Joel Paris's wife. What you may not know is that she's been instrumental in our company's success for 15 years. After reviewing our records, I discovered that Georgia has been directly involved in negotiating or facilitating 70% of our major contracts. She's traveled to investor meetings, restructured deals, even personally guaranteed certain high-risk ventures when traditional financing wasn't available." The room was silent, every eye on Georgia. She kept her expression neutral, but inside, her mind raced. Margaret was making her play, forcing the truth into the light whether Joel liked it or not. "Furthermore," Margaret continued, pulling out a document, "our corporate records show that Prestwidge Holdings, our majority shareholder, is personally owned by Georgia Prestwidge, which means, ladies and gentlemen, that Georgia doesn't just work for Paris manufacturing, she owns 60% of it." The silence shattered into shocked murmurs. Georgia saw Joel frozen at his table, champagne glass halfway to his lips, his face cycling through denial, shock, rage. Amy beside him looked utterly confused. Margaret handed Georgia the microphone. Georgia held it for a long moment, studying the crowd. CEOs she'd negotiated with, board members she'd maneuvered around Joel, journalists scribbling frantically, and Joel staring at her like she was a stranger. "Thank you, Margaret," Georgia said finally, her voice steady and clear. "I appreciate the recognition. It's true that I've been involved in Paris Manufacturing's operations for many years. My father taught me that real power doesn't need announcements or credit. It just needs to be effective. I've tried to honor that philosophy." She paused, let her words settle. "But I want to be clear about something. I didn't do this work for recognition. I did it because I believed in Paris Manufacturing's mission and potential. I still do. This company employs over 3,000 people. It produces equipment that makes other businesses successful. That's worth protecting, regardless of who gets credit." Another pause. She could feel the room hanging on her words. "My personal relationship with Joel is complicated and private. But my professional commitment to this company is neither. Paris Manufacturing has a brilliant future ahead. I intend to make sure it reaches that future, whatever that requires." She handed the microphone back to Margaret and returned to her spot in the crowd. The applause that followed was uncertain at first, then building, then genuine. Georgia accepted it with a slight nod, her heart pounding, but her face composed. Joel pushed through the crowd toward her, his face flushed with anger, barely contained by the public setting. "We need to talk, now." "I told you, Joel. We have lawyers for that." "You own my company?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You've been lying to me for 15 years?" "I've never lied about anything. You never asked the right questions." "This is—" He stopped himself, clearly aware of the audience. "Georgia, please, let's go somewhere private and discuss this rationally." "There's nothing to discuss. You wanted a divorce, you'll get one. Everything else is just details for the lawyers to sort out. You can't just—" "I can and I will." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You thought you held all the cards, Joel. You brought your mistress to my home and threatened to leave me with nothing. Now you know who really has nothing. How does it feel?" His hands clenched into fists. For a moment she thought he might actually lose control completely, might create a scene that would end his career. Then Amy appeared at his elbow, whispering something urgent, and he turned away. Georgia watched them leave, Joel stalking toward the exit, Amy hurrying to keep up, their carefully staged appearance crumbling into visible conflict. The party continued around her, but she knew the real story of the evening was already being written. Not Joel Paris's Christmas party. Georgia Prestwidge's Declaration of Independence. Matthew materialized beside her as the crowd began to thin. That was incredible. Dangerous, but incredible. Margaret forced my hand. I had to own it. You did more than own it. You claimed your throne. Georgia, everyone in this room now knows you're the real power. Joel can't recover from that. He'll try. He'll claim I manipulated him, stole from him. Let him try. We have proof of everything. Your ownership documents predate his supposed ownership by years. Every contract you negotiated has your signature somewhere in the paperwork. He has nothing but ego and lies. Georgia accepted another champagne glass from a passing waiter, her hands finally steady. What happens next? Next, Joel's lawyers scrambled to make sense of what they learned tonight. His board questions whether he should remain CEO. His clients wonder if their contracts are secure. And you, Georgia Prestwidge, decide what empire you want to build from these ashes. She looked out at the ballroom, at the people who now saw her, really saw her for the first time in 15 years, at the journalists already filing stories that would hit tomorrow's papers, at the life she'd hidden, cracking open like a chrysalis. "I don't want an empire," she said quietly. "I just want to be seen as myself. Is that too much to ask?" Matthew's hand found hers, squeezed gently. "No, it's exactly what you deserve. And after tonight, the whole world is watching." Georgia squeezed back, allowing herself this one moment of human connection. Tomorrow she'd rebuild her walls. Tomorrow she'd remember that trusting people led to heartbreak. But tonight, just for a moment, it felt good not to be alone. Chapter 7, The Queen's Court. Joel Paris discovered the full extent of his miscalculation at 6:30 the next morning when his phone began ringing non-stop. By 7, he'd stopped answering and sat in the penthouse, Georgia's penthouse, staring at headlines splashed across every business publication. Secret billionaire, Georgia Prestwidge's hidden empire, wife owns husband's company, the Georgia Prestwidge story. Each article detailed her father's legacy, her trust fund, her brilliant investments. They quoted CEOs praising her negotiation skills. They included photographs from last night showing her radiant and powerful while he looked blindsided. Amy appeared in the doorway, Madison fussing on her hip, her face pale. "Joel, I'm getting calls from my parents. They're asking if it's true that you lied to me about everything. Did you?" "Amy, not now. Did you lie?" Her voice cracked. "You told me Georgia knew about us, that you were separated. But last night she looked at me like I destroyed her life, and now everyone's saying she owns your company? It's complicated." Uncomplicate it, Madison started crying. I moved into another woman's home with my children thinking it was half yours. I married you thinking you were successful and honest. Now I'm reading that you're neither. So explain, Joel. Right now. He couldn't. How could he explain 15 years of not asking questions, of assuming Georgia's support was devotion rather than strategic investment? I need to go to the office, he said, grabbing his coat. There might not be a later, Amy called after him. Joel, I'm pregnant and I don't even know if you can support us. He left without answering. The Paris manufacturing building felt different. Employees who usually greeted him enthusiastically now offered careful nods. The receptionist looked at him with pity. Joel's assistant Brenda looked up as he approached. Mr. Paris, the board has called an emergency meeting for 9 o'clock. They're requesting your attendance. Requesting? Their words, sir. At 9 sharp, Joel entered the boardroom to find all 15 board members already seated. Margaret Torres at the head of the table where he usually sat. Joel, please sit, Margaret said, gesturing to a chair midway down, a subordinate's position. He remained standing. What's this about? The revelations from last night's party. Joel, did you know Georgia Prestwidge owns 60% of this company? I'm finding that out along with everyone else. That's problematic, David Chen said. As CEO, you should have known our ownership structure intimately. Your ignorance suggests negligence or deception. Neither reflects well. I trusted her. You trusted your wife with corporate ownership documents without reviewing them? Margaret's tone was incredulous. That's abdication of responsibility. What do you want from me? Joel demanded. An apology for not realizing my wife was secretly buying my company? Georgia didn't buy anything from under you, Margaret corrected. She bought a bankrupt company and rebuilt it. You just happened to be married to her while she did it. The words hit like a slap. I am this company. I made every major decision for 15 years. Did you? David pulled out a file. The Dubai contract, Georgia negotiated it. The German expansion, Georgia brokered it. Burton Industries, Georgia's college connection. Every major client came through Georgia's relationships, not yours. Joel thought back through 15 years of victories, trying to find one that was purely his. He couldn't. Furthermore, Margaret continued, several clients called this morning expressing concern about Georgia's departure. Burton Industries is threatening to renegotiate. Sarah Burton said if Georgia isn't involved in Paris Manufacturing's future, they'll take their business elsewhere. That's a $40 million annual contract. What do you want me to do? Joel asked, defeated. Recognize reality, Margaret said. Georgia Prestwidge is the majority shareholder. If she wants you removed as CEO, you're removed. The CEO serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder. You've been serving at Georgia's pleasure for 15 years. You just didn't know it. When he finally escaped to his office, Marcus was waiting with more bad news. Joel, the prenup you thought would protect you actually protects Georgia. You signed it thinking you were the wealthy party, but Georgia can argue Paris Manufacturing was acquired through her sole effort using premarital assets. It's not marital property, it's hers alone. What about the penthouse, my car? All in Georgia's name, all purchased with her money. Joel, in the eyes of the law, you're the dependent spouse. Joel laughed, hysterical. I make $700,000 a year, which you've been spending at a rate of about $1.2 million annually. The difference came from joint accounts funded by Georgia. Joel's phone buzzed. Matthew Fisher. Free for lunch? We should discuss how to minimize damage for everyone involved. An hour later, Joel sat across from Matthew Fisher in an expensive midtown restaurant, feeling completely outmatched. Let's be frank, Matthew said. Georgia could destroy you. She's choosing not to. Yet. I'm here to discuss the terms under which she continues to choose restraint. What does she want? Matthew slid a folder across the table. Georgia kept all real property, all investments, all assets, except his 12% Paris Manufacturing stake. She'd continue to allow him to serve as CEO, provided he met performance benchmarks and agreed to board oversight. He'd pay her nominal spousal support, and he'd publicly acknowledge her contributions. "This is robbery," Joel said flatly. "This is reality. Everything in that agreement already belongs to Georgia. She's not taking anything. She's just stopping the fiction that it was ever yours." Joel stared at the settlement agreement, at the legal language that would strip away every illusion. He thought about fighting. Then he thought about last night's party, about Margaret's words, about clients who valued Georgia over him, about journalists painting him as the fool who didn't know his wife ran his life. He could fight, but he'd lose. "If I sign this," Joel said slowly, "what guarantees do I have that Georgia won't destroy me later?" "You have my client's word. Georgia isn't interested in revenge. She's interested in moving forward. Sign the agreement, honor its terms, and she'll let you keep your dignity and career. Keep fighting, and she'll be forced to protect her interests more aggressively." Joel picked up the pen, felt its weight. He signed. Matthew collected the documents. "Smart choice. Georgia has one other request. She wants you to tell Amy the truth, all of it. Amy deserves to make informed decisions about her future. And if I refuse, Georgia will do it for you, along with providing Amy's divorce lawyer with very generous settlement recommendations at your expense." Matthew stood. "Joel, take advice from someone who learned this lesson the hard way. Own your mistakes. Apologize to the people you hurt. Georgia's giving you a chance to rebuild your life with some dignity intact. Don't waste it." That night, Joel returned to the penthouse to find Amy packing. "Where are you going?" Joel asked, though he already knew. "My parents' house." Amy didn't look at him, just kept folding clothes with trembling hands. "I talked to a lawyer today. He said I might have grounds to annul our marriage, that you misrepresented your financial situation, lied about being separated from Georgia." "Amy, please, don't." Her voice broke. "Don't ask me to stay. You lied to me for 3 years, Joel. You made me the other woman when I thought I was your wife. You brought me to live in another woman's home and told me it was yours. What am I supposed to do with that?" Joel watched his second family disintegrate just like his first. "I loved you. I still love you." "No, you don't. You love what I represented. A fresh start. A family that made you feel like a success. But Joel, you can't build a real life on lies. I'm done being part of your fiction." She finished packing, called a car service, left with both children and most of Joel's remaining hope. Alone in the enormous penthouse, Joel walked through rooms that had never been his, sat on furniture Georgia had purchased, drank scotch Georgia had chosen. His phone buzzed. A message from Georgia. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Joel." It was never me. He sat in the dark, surrounded by the trappings of a life that was never his, and finally understood what he'd lost. Not a wife, a queen, and queens, once abdicated, never returned to smaller thrones. Chapter 8. The Fall. 3 weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and paperwork and careful public statements. Georgia moved through it all with precision, signing documents that officially dissolved 15 years of marriage, restructuring Paris Manufacturing's leadership to reduce Joel's authority while maintaining his title, negotiating with clients who'd threatened to leave. She was brilliant at it. Matthew watched her navigate board meetings and investor calls with skill she'd hidden for years, except now everyone could see it. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore, but late at night in her hotel suite, Georgia was less certain. She'd won everything. Joel's power was broken. Her empire was acknowledged. Her brilliance undeniable. So why did victory feel so hollow? "You're thinking too much," Matthew said one evening when they were reviewing final settlement documents. They'd fallen into a rhythm, working late, sharing meals, conversations that wandered from legal strategy to life philosophy. Georgia had started looking forward to these sessions, started noticing things about Matthew. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how he always ordered her favorite tea without asking. She was starting to care about him, and it terrified her. "I can't stop thinking," Georgia admitted. "This should feel like vindication. Instead, it just feels empty. I won. Joel lost. Amy left him. His career is in shambles. I should be celebrating." "But you're not cruel, so you feel guilty instead." "Is that weak?" "It's human." Matthew set down his pen. "Georgia, you've spent 3 weeks destroying the man who betrayed you while being gracious to everyone else affected. You've protected your company, preserved jobs for 3,000 employees, and prevented Joel's children from becoming collateral damage. That's not weakness. That's strength with conscience." "Then why do I feel like I've lost something?" "Because you have. You lost the belief that love works the way you thought it did. You lost trust in your own judgment. You lost 15 years of your life to someone who didn't deserve them." He paused. "Those are real losses, Georgia. Winning the divorce doesn't erase them." She looked at him, really looked, and saw something in his expression that made her chest tight. "Matthew, we should keep this professional." "We should," he agreed. "But we're not, are we?" "I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know how to trust anymore." "I know, and I'm not asking you to." He stood, gathered his papers. "I'm just asking you to remember that not every man is Joel. Some of us actually see you, value you, would consider it an honor just to stand beside you without needing to own your light." After he left, Georgia stood at her window watching the city. She thought about what Matthew had said, about trust and loss, and the difference between loving someone and loving what they could do for you. Her phone rang. Sarah Burton. "Georgia, we have a problem. Burton Industries board met today. They want to continue our partnership with Paris Manufacturing, but only if you're actively involved in operations. They don't trust Joel to maintain quality standards." "I'm planning to stay involved." "As what? Majority shareholder who occasionally weighs in? They want you in a formal role, CEO or nothing." Georgia closed her eyes. She'd expected this, but taking Joel's position, publicly claiming the throne he'd occupied? "Sarah, I can't do that to him. He's already lost everything." "He lost nothing, Georgia. He never had it in the first place. You've been doing the CEO's job for 15 years while he took credit. Now Burton Industries wants you to have the title too. And honey, between us, so do I. Joel's a nice guy who gave good speeches, but you're brilliant. You made Paris Manufacturing successful. It's time everyone acknowledged that. If I take his position, he'll be humiliated. He humiliated himself when he brought his mistress to your home. Georgia, stop protecting him. You've been protecting men your entire life. When do you protect yourself?" The question lingered after Georgia hung up. When did she protect herself? The answer came 2 days later, when Joel appeared at her hotel suite unannounced, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled. "Georgia, please, we need to talk." She almost closed the door, but something in his expression stopped her, not arrogance, but genuine desperation. "5 minutes," she said. Joel entered, looked around at the temporary life she'd built. "I need you to stop. The board oversight, the client interference, telling Amy the truth. You're destroying me." "I'm not doing anything to you, Joel. I'm just removing the support I provided for 15 years. This is what your life looks like without me propping it up. You can't just—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. "Georgia, I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish and stupid, but I gave you 15 years. Doesn't that count for something? You gave me 15 years of lies, of taking credit for my work, of letting me believe you loved me while you built a life with someone else. So, no, Joel, it doesn't count for much. I did love you. I still do. You love what I could do for you. There's a difference." Joel sank onto her sofa, put his head in his hands. "What do you want from me? An apology? Public confession? Tell me what would satisfy you and I'll do it. Georgia studied him. This man she'd spent 15 years loving, who now felt like a stranger. I want you to understand what you had and threw away. I want you to look in the mirror and see a man who was given everything and valued nothing. I want you to feel even a fraction of what I felt when you walked through my door with your new family. I do feel it, he said, his voice breaking. Amy left, took the kids. She's filing for annulment. My own mother won't speak to me. Board members look at me like I'm pathetic. Every client meeting is a reminder that I was never the reason they stayed. Georgia, I've lost everything. No, Joel. You've lost the things you thought were yours but never were. There's a difference. He looked up at her, and for a moment she saw genuine pain, real understanding of what he'd destroyed. It didn't make her forgive him, but it made her pity him. The board wants to make you CEO, Joel said quietly. Margaret told me this morning. They're going to vote next week. They want me to resign gracefully. I know. Are you going to do it? Take my job? Georgia thought about Sarah's words, about 15 years of invisible labor, about the empire she'd built that everyone now wanted her to publicly claim. I haven't decided. If you take it, I'll have nothing. No title, no career, no reputation. You'll have taken everything from me. I didn't take anything, Joel. I just stopped giving it. He stood, walked to the door, then turned back. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not losing the company or the marriage or even Amy. It's realizing that you were always better than me, smarter, more talented, more capable. And I was too stupid and arrogant to see it until you were gone. Finally, Georgia said softly, something true. After Joel left, Georgia sat alone with his words echoing. She could refuse the CEO position, let Joel keep his title and some dignity. Or she could take what was rightfully hers and step fully into the power she'd hidden for so long. Her phone rang. Matthew. How did it go with Joel? He begged me not to take the CEO position, said I'd be taking everything from him. And I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to refuse, to prove I'm not vindictive. Another part knows I've earned this. Matthew was quiet for a long moment. I'd ask yourself a different question. Not what would be kind to Joel, but what would be true to yourself. Georgia, you've spent your whole life making yourself smaller. If you refuse this position to protect Joel's feelings, you're doing it again. Is that really who you want to be? I don't know who I want to be anymore. Then let me tell you who I see. I see a woman who's brilliant and powerful and deserves to stand in the full light of her own success. I see someone who's earned every victory she's claiming, and I see a person I admire more than anyone I've ever met. Georgia felt tears prick her eyes. Matthew, I'm not saying this to pressure you. I'm saying it because it's true. You deserve to be seen, Georgia, fully, unapologetically, without shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not for Joel, not for anyone else. You. After they hung up, Georgia walked to her window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Joel was nursing his wounds, and Amy was rebuilding her life, and Matthew was probably working late, believing in her even when she struggled to believe in herself. And Georgia had a choice to make. She picked up her phone, dialed Margaret Torres. Margaret, it's Georgia, about the CEO position. I've made my decision. Chapter 9. The Final Truth. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 sharp on a Monday morning, 1 week before Christmas. Georgia arrived early, wearing a navy suit that was all business, no apology. The boardroom fell silent as she entered, 15 pairs of eyes tracking her movement to the head of the table. Joel's usual seat, her seat now, if she chose to claim it. Thank you all for coming, Georgia began. I know this has been a difficult few weeks. I want to address the CEO question directly. Margaret leaned forward. Georgia, the board is unanimous. We want you as our CEO. Joel's resignation letter is already drafted. All you need to do is accept. I appreciate that. But before I give my answer, there's something you all need to know. Georgia pulled out a folder Matthew had delivered yesterday, the last piece of the investigator's report. Joel has been embezzling from Paris Manufacturing for the past 2 years. The room erupted. Georgia waited for the shock to settle, then laid out the evidence. Shell companies Joel had created, funds diverted from operating accounts, offshore accounts meant to hide the stolen money, total amount approximately $2 million. He used it to maintain his life with Amy in London while keeping up appearances here, Georgia explained. The expensive apartment, private schools for Joel Jr., the engagement ring, all paid for with company money that wasn't his to take. David Chen looked pale. This is fraud. We need to contact the authorities. We could, Georgia agreed, or we could handle it internally. Joel's already lost his marriage, his reputation, most of his assets. Sending him to prison would accomplish what? Destroy him completely? Make Amy's children fatherless? He stole from us, Margaret said firmly, from the company you built. You have every right to prosecute. I do, but I'm asking myself what I want my victory to look like. Do I want Joel destroyed, or do I want Paris Manufacturing to move forward without him? The board debated for an hour. Some wanted prosecution, others wanted mercy. Finally, Georgia made the call. Here's what I propose. Joel resigns as CEO immediately. He surrenders his 12% stake as restitution for the embezzlement. We don't press charges provided he signs a comprehensive NDA, a non-compete agreement. He walks away with nothing except his freedom and the knowledge that I chose mercy over revenge. And if he refuses? David asked. Then we prosecute fully, but I think he'll accept. He knows what I could do to him. He knows I'm choosing not to. Maybe that knowledge will help him become a better man. The board voted. Georgia's proposal passed 10-5. She called Joel immediately after the meeting. Georgia? I know about the embezzlement, Joel, about the offshore accounts and the shell companies. I know everything. Silence. Then, are you calling the police? No, but you're going to resign as CEO today, surrender your company stake as restitution, sign documents agreeing never to work in manufacturing again or to discuss Paris Manufacturing publicly. In exchange, I won't press charges. You're taking everything from me. I'm giving you a chance, Joel, to walk away, to rebuild, to be better than you were. Most people don't get that after what you did. More silence. Then quietly. Why? Because Amy's children deserve a father. Because destroying you won't unbreak my heart. And because I'm choosing to be better than my anger. The question is, are you going to take the offer? Do I have a choice? Everyone has a choice, Joel. You chose to lie, to cheat, to steal. Now you get to choose whether to accept mercy or force prosecution. Which is it? He chose mercy. The resignation letter arrived 2 hours later, along with signed agreements. By end of business, Joel Paris was officially no longer employed by Paris Manufacturing, no longer a shareholder, no longer anything except a cautionary tale. Georgia should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt exhausted. Matthew found her that evening in her office, her real office now, the CEO's suite overlooking Manhattan. He knocked softly, entered when she waved him in, and set down a bottle of champagne. Celebrating? Georgia asked. Honoring. There's a difference. He poured 2 glasses, handed her one. You won, Georgia, completely, unequivocally. You should acknowledge that. It doesn't feel like winning. What does it feel like? She thought about the question. Like I've proven something to everyone except myself. I know I'm capable. I know I'm powerful. But I also know I spent 15 years loving someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a mistake I can logic away. Matthew sat across from her, champagne untouched. Can I tell you something? When my marriage ended, I spent months cataloging my ex-wife's failures, all the ways she'd wronged me, all the reasons I was better off without her. It took my therapist 3 sessions to make me see what I was really doing. What was that? Avoiding the truth that I'd failed too, that I'd been a bad partner, that I'd loved the idea of marriage more than the actual person I'd married. Acknowledging that hurt more than blaming her ever could. Georgia met his eyes. What's your point? My point is that you're doing the opposite. You're blaming yourself for Joel's failures. You're treating love as a mistake instead of recognizing that loving someone isn't wrong. Choosing the wrong person is painful, but it doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. I should have seen the signs. Maybe. Or maybe Joel was good at hiding. Maybe you wanted to believe the best in him. Georgia, you're allowed to have trusted someone and been wrong. You're allowed to have loved him perfectly. You're even allowed to grieve what you thought you had, even though it wasn't real. The words broke something open in her chest. I don't want to grieve him. He doesn't deserve my tears. You're not crying for him. You're crying for yourself. For the woman who waited 3 years. For the version of your life that died when he walked through the door with Amy. That woman deserves to be mourned. Georgia felt tears sliding down her face, the first real tears since everything had shattered. Matthew handed her tissues, didn't try to fix it, just sat with her while she cried for the marriage that had never existed and the trust that had been so thoroughly destroyed. When she finally stopped, voice raw, she said, I don't know how to move forward from this, how to trust anyone again. You don't have to figure it out tonight, or this month, or even this year. Matthew hesitated, then reached across the desk and took her hand. But Georgia, when you're ready, I want you to know something. I see you. Not your money, or your power, or what you can do for me, just you. And I think you're extraordinary exactly as you are. She looked at their joined hands, felt the warmth of his touch, and something in her wanted to lean into it. To believe him, to risk her heart one more time. But not yet. Not when the wounds were still fresh. Not when she was still learning to stand on her own. Matthew, I can't. You've been wonderful and I care about you, but I need to be alone for a while, to figure out who I am without defining myself through someone else. She expected disappointment. Instead, Matthew squeezed her hand gently. Then I'll wait, however long it takes, because Georgia Prestwidge is worth waiting for. He left her then, respecting her boundary, and Georgia sat alone in her new office watching nightfall over Manhattan. She'd won her company, reclaimed her power, and proven her worth to everyone who doubted her. But the real victory, she understood now, wasn't defeating Joel. It was learning to value herself, to stop shrinking to make others comfortable, to stand fully in her own light without apology. That transformation would take time, healing, learning to trust again, starting with trusting herself. Georgia picked up her champagne glass, raised it to her reflection in the darkened window. To new beginnings, she said quietly, and to the queen who forgot she was powerful. Her reflection smiled back, and for the first time in 15 years, Georgia recognized herself. Chapter 10. The Queen's Victory. 6 months after the divorce finalized, Georgia Prestwidge stood on the stage of a women's business conference in Boston, looking out at 2,000 faces waiting to hear her story. The Forbes article naming her one of the 100 most powerful women in business was still fresh, her face on the cover alongside a headline that read, "The Billionaire Who Hid in Plain Sight." I spent 15 years making myself invisible, Georgia began, her voice steady and clear. I built a $400 million fortune while telling my husband I had a modest inheritance. I negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts while letting him take credit. I saved a company from bankruptcy while remaining a silent partner. She paused. Let the audience absorb that. I did all of this because I thought it was what love required. I thought supporting someone meant erasing yourself. I thought partnership meant one person shining while the other held the light. A young woman in the third row was taking notes furiously. Georgia saw herself in that intensity, that hunger to understand. I was wrong. Partnership means standing beside someone who sees your brilliance and celebrates it. Love means finding someone who wants you visible, not hidden. And power means nothing if you're too afraid to claim it. The applause was thunderous. After her speech, the young woman from the third row approached during the book signing. Ms. Prestwidge, I'm Nina. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been making myself smaller at my company for 3 years, and your story made me realize I don't have to. Then change it, Georgia said simply. Today, tomorrow, however long it takes. But change it. That evening, Georgia returned to her penthouse, the one she'd bought 6 months ago, twice the size of the old one, with her name alone on the deed. No ghosts, no memories of Joel, just space she'd chosen for herself. Her phone buzzed. Matthew. Saw your conference speech online. Brilliant as always. Dinner tomorrow if you're free? They'd been doing this for months now. Careful dinners, long conversations, a slow rebuilding of trust that Matthew never rushed. He'd waited like he'd promised, letting Georgia heal at her own pace. She was almost ready. Almost. Georgia texted back, tomorrow's good, but Matthew, I need to tell you something first. Anything. I'm not the same woman I was 6 months ago. I'm harder now, more careful. I don't know if I can ever love the way I did before. His response came quickly. Good, because I don't want the woman you were before. I want the woman you are now, walls and all. Georgia stared at the message, something warm unfurling in her chest. She'd spent 6 months rebuilding herself, learning to value her own company, to sleep soundly alone. She'd proven she didn't need anyone to complete her. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to want someone, on her terms, as an equal. She called instead of texting. Matthew, that dinner tomorrow. Make it 8 o'clock, somewhere quiet where we can actually talk. Are you sure? His voice was careful, hopeful. I'm sure that I want to try. I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't promise I won't panic or pull away. But you've been patient and kind, and you've never asked me to be anything except myself. I think I'm ready to see where that leads. Then 8 o'clock it is, Georgia? Yes? I've been waiting 6 months to hear you say that. After they hung up, Georgia walked to her windows overlooking Central Park. Down below, the city moved through its endless rhythms, people falling in love, breaking apart, rebuilding, trying again. All of it messy and imperfect and beautifully human. She thought about Joel sometimes, wondered if he'd learned anything from their catastrophe. Last she'd heard, he was working in commercial real estate in Connecticut, living modestly, trying to rebuild a relationship with his children. Amy had moved on, was seeing someone new. Their lives had continued without Georgia in them, just as hers had continued without them. No reunion, no forgiveness, just separate futures built from the ashes of shared mistakes. And that was okay. That was healing. Georgia's phone buzzed again. Sarah Burton. Saw your speech. So proud of you. Lunch next week? Another text from Margaret Torres. Board meeting went well. Q4 numbers are exceptional. You're a natural leader. Her life was full now. Friends who valued her. Work that challenged her. A future she was building with her own hands. And maybe, if she was brave enough to try, someone who saw her completely and wanted her anyway. The next evening, Georgia met Matthew at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. Candlelight and intimacy and wine that tasted like possibility. They talked about everything except business, his favorite books, her secret love of terrible reality TV, the trip to Morocco he'd always wanted to take, her dream of learning to paint. I have a confession, Matthew said over dessert. I've been in love with you since the Christmas party, watching you walk into that room, powerful and unbroken, claiming your throne. I knew that night I wanted to be the person who got to stand beside you. Georgia's heart was racing, but not with panic, with something else, something that felt like readiness. I'm not easy to love, Matthew. I'm stubborn and independent, and I don't know how to need anyone. I don't want you to need me. I want you to choose me, every day, freely, because you want me there, not because you can't survive alone. And if I'm not ready for a while, if we have to go slow, then we go slow. Georgia, I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I'm looking for someone extraordinary to share my life with. You're that person. However long it takes, whatever pace you need, I'm here. She reached across the table, took his hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Then let's try, carefully, honestly, with both of us fully visible. Matthew smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Deal. 3 months later, Georgia attended another women's conference, this time in San Francisco. After her keynote, a young woman approached with tears in her eyes. "How did you learn to trust again?" she asked. "After everything that happened, after all that betrayal, how did you open your heart?" Georgia thought about the question carefully, about Matthew's patience, about her own journey from invisible to unstoppable, about the difference between loving from fear and loving from strength. "I learned that trust isn't weakness," she said finally. "Trusting the wrong person is painful, but closing yourself off to everyone because one person failed you, that's giving them more power than they deserve. I chose to believe that not all men are like my ex-husband, that some people actually mean their promises, that I could be fully myself and still be loved. But what if you're wrong? What if you get hurt again?" Georgia smiled. "Then I survive it. Because I survived the first heartbreak. And I'm stronger now. I have myself now. That's something no one can take away." The young woman nodded, understanding dawning. Georgia continued, speaking to the whole room now. "I built an empire alone. I proved I didn't need anyone. But I'm learning that independence and partnership aren't opposites. You can be whole on your own and still choose to share your life with someone who sees you as an equal. That's not weakness. That's the final victory." She looked out at the audience, at the hundreds of women listening with hungry eyes, and saw herself reflected in every face. Women who'd made themselves smaller, women who'd given credit to others, women who were learning slowly and painfully to claim their own power. "Stop waiting for permission to be extraordinary," Georgia said. "Stop hiding your brilliance to make others comfortable. Stop believing that being loved means being less. You are already enough. You always were. The only question is, when are you going to believe it?" The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. That night, Georgia video-called Matthew from her hotel room. He answered immediately, his face filling her screen, his smile warm and genuine. "How'd the speech go?" he asked. "Good. Great, actually. I'm getting better at this visibility thing. You were always good at it. You just needed to practice being seen." They talked for an hour, easy and comfortable, the conversation flowing like water. When they finally said goodnight, Georgia sat in the quiet hotel room, feeling something she hadn't felt in years: peace, contentment, hope. She pulled out her journal, a habit she'd started in therapy, and wrote, "I was a queen who forgot her crown, spent 15 years building someone else's kingdom while my own empire waited in shadows. But kingdoms don't disappear just because you're not looking. They wait, patient and powerful, ready for the moment you remember who you are. I am Georgia Prestwidge, not anyone's wife, not anyone's secret weapon, just me, brilliant and flawed and learning to trust again. And that's more than enough." She closed the journal and looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back was different from the one who'd waited in an emerald nightdress for a husband who'd already left. This woman was harder, wiser, unafraid. This woman was free. Somewhere in Connecticut, Joel Paris was living a smaller life, learning lessons he should have learned years ago. Somewhere in Boston, Amy Edgar was rebuilding with her children, creating a future free from lies. And here, In this hotel room overlooking San Francisco, Georgia Prestwidge was writing her next chapter. Not a revenge story, not a cautionary tale, just a life, imperfect and honest and entirely her own. The Queen had reclaimed her throne, and this time she was never giving it away.